Hello, digestion part 2. Let's get a little more in depth into the parts of the digestive system. So when we are looking at the digestive tract itself, it is not just a tube. The tube has 4 different layers and 2 different nervous systems that control the layers. So we talked about the villi, and the villi is the folds on the folds, or the finger-like projections. But there is also 4 different layers. The internal layer is called the mucosa. And it is a thin layer of epithelium that allows for things to be absorbed. You want it thin so it can come through easily. Then you have the submucosa. Sub means below. So the submucosa is where there is the blood vessels and the lymph vessels. The lymph will become very important when we talk about fat later, as well as nerves. And these vessels need to absorb and carry away the food once it's digested. And the nerves need to control all the muscles as they move the food through the digestive tract. Then there is a muscle layer, and it is a double muscle layer, except on the stomach where there's 3 layers. The inside layer is longitudinal, and the other one is circular. So this way it can squeeze and kind of lengthen in both ways. And both layers are needed to contract and relax to move the food through the process, through the digestive tract, through the process called peristalsis. Then the outside layer is the serosa, and this is the strong connective tissue that separates from other organs and holds it all together. So when we talked about peristalsis, peristalsis is this movement that there is contraction that helps move the piece through the tube itself. I have a little activity I want you to look at in terms of this peristalsis. Okay? Okay, we will continue to look through the digestive system parts, and as we go through, pay attention to where is there mechanical digestion and where there is chemical. So we've already talked about mechanical digestion with chewing and swallowing, and there's a little bit of chemical digestion starting with the saliva. And with the saliva, it produces something called salivary amylase, and the salivary amylase starts to break down the carbohydrates into their smaller components. Then when it gets to the stomach, the food gets to the stomach, you have a peristalsis mixing and propulsion, and that's all mechanical. You've got the stomach mixing up. Then you have chemical digestion of foods and proteins and a wee bit of fat. So we are going to talk about the enzyme trypsin and how hydrochloric acid helps to activate trypsin, and then pepsin. Pepsin is in the stomach. Trypsin's in the digestive tract. Pepsin breaks down proteins to peptides. Lots of P words for you. So pepsin will occur in the stomach, and there is a wee bit of absorption of alcohol and of aspirin. Then when we get to the small intestine, this is where there is a large amount of chemical digestion, because we're going to finish the carbohydrates down to glucose. We're going to take the fats and put them into glycerol and fatty acids. We're going to take the proteins, make it to polypeptides, and then the polypeptides to amino acids, and then absorb those. We're also going to look at the absorption of vitamins and minerals. We'll look at that. Okay, in the large intestine, there is still mechanical digestion taking place because you have mixing and propulsion, but there is no chemical digestion done by the human. However, if you have a good crop of gut bacteria, they will do the breaking down. And then this is the last place where the ions and the water get absorbed. So as we go through each of the organs, pay attention to the different parts and lots of enzymes. Here's a good summary table, but we will look at it as we go through each substance or each organ. Okay, let's look in detail. So I'm working on the worksheet, or the note sheet as I called it, as we go through it. So saliva is very important, and it is released from the 3 pairs of salivary glands in your mouth. You release amylase, which is it is an enzyme to break down carbohydrates. And it will take carbohydrates to what are called disaccharides. And then monosaccharides. And the monosaccharides are glucose and fructose. Okay? We'll look at those. And that's the job of amylase, to start breaking things down. Then lipase, you'll notice that most enzymes end in A's, and most of them, with the exception of a few, break down what the part is. So lipase is an enzyme for lipids. And it's not very active in the mouth, but it will break down to into glycerol and fatty acids. Break triglycerides down. And then there are antibodies in the mouth, and the antibodies are immune proteins. And they will start to fight infection. Okay, good. So that is the start. Now, all of those are the chemical process. Then we get to the tongue. And if you think of when you swallow or chewing, or next time you go and chew some food, think of how your tongue pushes things around. And you usually don't realize there's something up with your tongue until you burn it. Oh, the old pizza cheese burn or the hot chocolate burn where it's right on the tip of your mouth. Very painful. But the job of the tongue is to clean and push your food around. Push and mash your food, basically. Then when we look at the teeth, I want you to be aware that there's different type of teeth. I won't quiz you on it, but if you notice on your front teeth, here, let's put this here. On your front teeth, they're sharp and good for cutting. And if you think of animals that have large incisors, like rabbits or beavers, they do a lot of cutting. Then you have your canine teeth, which aren't really big in humans. But if you think of something like a canine, like a dog or a cat that have large ripping teeth. And then at the back, you have your molars. And the molars are good for grinding. And if you look at something that grinds a lot, like horses or cows or elephants, very big grinding teeth, they're big and flat and have a good grinding surface. So you have these different types of teeth to allow for different types of actions. Just be aware of them. I won't quiz you on the different ones, but it is interesting to know. Okay, then we're going through some terms. A bolus is what happens when the food is swallowed. So as it comes down the mouth, out of the mouth into the tongue. Oh, we didn't talk about the tongue also helps to swallow food. And as the tongue goes back, it closes over the epiglottis to push the food into the esophagus and not into the air tube, the trachea. Good. Then we talked about bolus is the word for when you swallow a bit of food. Chyme is the stomach contents. And it's very acidic because of the hydrochloric acid. And then feces is the fancy word for poop. When we looked at the stomach has sphincters at the top, which are circular muscles. And the circular muscles are to tighten them up on the top and on the bottom. So that way, when your stomach is churning, it doesn't go up or out. Now, quite often, if you have a lot of acidity, the food on the top of the stomach will go backwards into the esophagus. People call it heartburn, but truly it should be called esophagus burn. Then we are looking at the secretions in the stomach. Okay, when we look at the stomach, we are reminded again that there's 3 layers of muscle on the stomach, but there's also these deep gastric pits that aren't shown in this textbook because that would make sense. The gastric pits go down and they produce a bunch of different chemicals. So the first thing is hydrochloric acid. Hydrochloric acid has a couple of functions. The first is to kill any bacteria that happen to get through the throat and down the mouth. The second is to acidify the contents. And Being highly acidified, it will take the enzyme pepsinogen, which is secreted from the gastric pit, and turn it into pepsin, and then pepsin will now break down protein. The stomach also produces mucus, and mucus is very important to give a protective slimy coating for a couple of reasons. One is to help the food lubricate better, and the other is to prevent the stomach from being broken down itself. Then there's a little bit of enzyme called lipase. Okay, so the semi-liquid chyme is the contents of the stomach. So when we go back to the summary table, hydrochloric acid is to acidify to kill bacteria and to turn on the pepsinogen, which is the inactive form of pepsin, and pepsin breaks down protein. Then you have mucus, which is used to lubricate and also to prevent the digestive organ, the stomach, from being digested. And then lipase breaking down. Now, when we get into the small intestine, the only thing small about the small intestine is the diameter. The small intestine is very, very large in length, almost 9 meters. So most of you are probably like 1.5 meters. So if you take 7 times your height, that will give it to you. When you look at the small intestine, there are 3 parts. The duodenum, which is the first 12 inches, because duo means 2 and denum means 10. Then you've got the jejunum and the ileum. Now, what I want you to look at is the mucosal lining, the villi, microvilli, bile and pancreatic duct. Here is our small intestine. Notice the duodenum is attached to the stomach with the pyloric sphincter in between. And then you have the duodenum, the jejunum, and the ileum at the bottom. And there is a mucosal lining. The inner lining has all these folds, and on these folds it has more finger-like projections called microvilli. And the microvilli will increase the surface area a massive amount. So this way that you have a very good surface area for absorption. Also, the surface area is very important because in each one of the villi is a blood supply, which of course it doesn't show here. It doesn't show the blood supply, but in each finger-like projection, there is a very good blood supply. And the nutrients, the broken down nutrients of glucose and amino acids get absorbed in the blood supply. Then there is also a finger of the lacteal and the lymphatic vessels. So the lymphatic vessels will absorb the fat, which we will look at later on. Good. Now the duodenum is the first 10 centimeters, and into the duodenum, that is where you can barely see it, but that's where the contents of the liver come from. And the liver has about 250 jobs. The job that's involved with digestion is the creation of the bile. And then bile will then be stored in the gallbladder until it is ready to be released. And then it'll be released from the gallbladder into the duodenum. There's also this organ called the pancreas. And this pancreas is where the pancreatic juices are made. And the pancreatic juices have an enzyme for every single nutrition. So it's got a lipase, it's got a protease, it's got a nucleotidase, and it also has lipases. So it will break it down. So when we look at the duodenum, you'll see that there are digestive enzymes from the pancreas, trypsin, chymotrypsin, and these break down proteins into amino acids. Then lipase will work along with bile. The bile will just form micelles, which are small droplets of fat, but the bile salts help to mix it in with water, and will also help to the bile salts help to make small droplets of fat, on which the lipase can then work and take it apart. In the last part of the intestine, that's called the duodenum. This is where more water is diffused, or it is facilitatedly diffusion, which means it can have a an aquaporin, or it can be, and there can also be active transport of sodium, amino acids, small peptides, water-soluble vitamins, and even glucose. Okay, and it will take it into the blood. Now, there's also the lymph, and the fat will go into the lymph. Iron is also absorbed. Vitamin B12 is absorbed, and water and lipids are absorbed. The last section is the ileum, and again, the ileum, you are continuing to absorb water. Last step on the tour is the large intestine, and it's in the large intestine where water is removed from the chyme and it forms what is called feces. So although water, the majority of the water is removed in the small intestine, the large intestine's last and final job is to absorb water. There's also bacteria that will help in the breakdown of any other nutrition in the large intestine. And that has taken us through our introduction. That was a little quick for the ending, but all the information to fill out the note table has been covered. If not, go ahead and pull it out of the textbook or rewatch the video again, and you will have all you need for the digestive part. Take care.